In this video, I'm going to share with you a few things that I wish that I knew when I started airbrushing. Let's get into it right now. So when you start airbrushing, one of the first things you're going to need is an airbrush. And deciding which particular airbrush to go for can be a daunting task with so many different makes and models available. Apart from single action and double action, the other main difference is that you can get a suction feed airbrush like this Sparmax, or you can go for a gravity feed airbrush like this Eclipse. So all have their pros and cons, and you'll probably find that you'll get a little bit of a collection happening once you do get into airbrushing. And even though I started on a Pash VL double action airbrush kit, I then moved up to an Iwata HPC, and then as you can see now, I've got everything from the GSI Krios, the Iwata Micron SB, which has the side feed cup, the Iwata Eclipse, and even a trigger airbrush like this Neo here. So your first main choice will be single action or double action, but basically double action means that when you press down for air, you pull back for paint. With a single action, you press down for air and you'll get paint and air at the same time. They definitely have their place in the market, and there's plenty of people that love using single action, but if you do want to do more artwork and a lot of the things that I show you how to do on my videos, then I would recommend that you'd go with a double action. Your next main choice is going to be whether you go siphon feed, meaning that the paint is siphoned up through this tube and then propels through your airbrush. So obviously you put your paint in the jar, or gravity feed, where the natural flow of gravity allows that paint to flow through the color cup and into the front of the airbrush, and then the air propels that onto your surface. Again, it's really dependent on what you wish to do with the airbrush. If you want to do general all-round airbrushing, lots of automotive work, I find that a gravity feed airbrush is best, as you can get up nice and close to your surface. The natural flow of that gravity makes it easier to work down on surfaces. So if you're doing, say, a Harley tank or something like that, where you've got to sit and work down on the top of that tank, well then a gravity feed brush is going to do that a lot easier. Whereas if you're using a siphon feed, you can see I've got the jar in the way and my hand sort of holds onto the jar. I mean, if you want to remove your hand, that will make that airbrush a little bit less steady. You can still get up nice and close, but we're going to have issues here because the paint's going to sit horizontally when I'm tipping the cup, and we're not going to be able to suck up the paint, so you're going to get intermittent flow. So why would you go for a suction feed airbrush then if there's a few limitations? Well, you can have numerous cups filled with color, and these particular brushes are really popular for t-shirt artists or anyone working more so on horizontal surfaces like wall murals, things like that. Or if you need to be using more product, say for special effects, makeup or body paint, then you'll find that a siphon feed may be best for you. You can also see there is a trigger option as well, and that's more comfortable for you. Say you're a spray painter and you want to get into airbrushing, well then you might prefer this setup because it's more like a spray gun. And for the really fine detail, you may want to go with a side feed where it doesn't hold a lot of product, but you can definitely work flat, and you can also spin that cup around as you need to get it in a nice comfy position. This particular one is a Micron, so it has a really fine needle nozzle setup at 0.18. So as a quick summary, any of these are going to do the job. Even some of the really cheap airbrushes, I would recommend double action, my personal preference gravity feed, and then it really comes down to what feels most comfortable in your hand. So go to a retailer if you can, pick up an airbrush and see what feels comfortable for you, and that's the one I would go with. Don't be so concerned about price, especially when you're starting out. You don't necessarily need to spend $500 to $600 or more on, say, a Micron, or even sort of a few hundred, but you don't need to go to that level when you start. Just remember that when you're learning, you haven't got that control yet. You're not going to get the performance that you can really get out of these brushes. So I would recommend that you start off with something that's a bit more reasonable. You can look into, say, the Sparmax range, the Iwata Eclipse. It's a great all-round brush. Even something like the PS289 GSI Krios, that's a great brush and for a reasonable price, and that'll definitely get you started as well as become a handy airbrush that you'll use for years to come. So now that you've got your airbrush sorted, the next thing is you're going to need some paint. But what paint will you need? I'm going to go through a couple of things that I wish that I knew when I first started. So when I first started airbrushing, I pretty much started using urethane based paints, and even though they flowed amazing through the airbrush. You got little to no tip drying. They were heavily toxic and they're always a bit of a nightmare to use. And especially if you're airbrushing from home, it makes it more difficult to use something like that. But now the paint technology has increased so much that I love using Trident water-based airbrush colors. They get reduced or thinned with their reducer. You generally work off a 1-to-1 ratio, especially if you're starting out with the airbrush. But the beauty of these is that they're a multi-surface technology, so you can use them on paper, canvas, t-shirts. You can even clear coat over the top of them with acrylic or 2-pack clear. So there's really no need to use any of those really toxic paints anymore. You can even get candies now that are made by Createx, the Candy 2.0, which simulate candy colors. So there's lots of different options for you, but that is definitely something that I wish that I had when I started. So now you have your airbrush, you have your paint sorted. What am I going to do with an air source? Well, you can go for the battery style airbrushes if you definitely don't want to use a compressor. But the one thing that I never realized when I started is that you don't necessarily need a specific airbrush compressor. You can utilize any compressor that you already have. Matter of fact, some of the larger workshop style compressors, I run one here in my studio, a belt drive compressor. If you have a large tank, they don't turn on a lot, so that way you don't have that really noisy compressor sound all the time when you're airbrushing. You do, however, need to fit another moisture trap regulator closest to where you're working, just to stop any contaminants or moisture going through your airline and contaminating your work. But you definitely don't need to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a compact, silent, dedicated airbrush compressor. By all means, if you want, that's fine. They are very compact, they are silent, and they're perfect for like apartments if you're airbrushing in there, or you're just doing small things, that's fine. But if you want to do general airbrushing, you want to do some automotive stuff, some large scale murals, then you'll find that a regular workshop compressor is going to be a lot cheaper option than going for something that is a very small, compact, dedicated airbrush compressor. So I hope that that's given you some sort of insight. I've got a few videos in the description below that will focus on an airbrush buyer's guide so you can get more out of it. Also a mixing guide for your Trident water-based paints, all in the description below, so go check them out as well. To continue your learning, you can definitely check out our online course, which is linked up in the description below. You can also check out a few more of our videos here, and until next time, go grab your airbrush, do some amazing artwork yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.